Pop Culture Pastor.
So, Cody, this has been bothering me for quite a while, and I think this is something that needs to be addressed. Movie theaters need to address this. Why isn't the little cup that they give you of nacho cheese sauce bigger? It should be bigger because that stuff's not expensive.
Because the containers are already pre-made.
Well, but they don't even use the container anymore, right? Because so they give you, well, it used to be the little plastic container with the little reservoirs, and the big one was for the chips, and the little one was for the cheese sauce. But now they give you this like cardboard box with a bag of chips, because I guess that's more health conscious, and then they give you like a tub of cheese. But it's never big enough. Like even for the chips they give me. Like I always ask for an extra cheese sauce and then I have to pay for it because that's like the little bag of chips goes well. You know, there's a certain ratio of cheese to chip that you have to adhere to. And if you want it to last longer, you go with a little bit less cheese on the chip.
Yeah, I find myself doing that occasionally, but
we got to figure this out.
These are the problems that are plaguing the world right now.
They are. And I think I've got it figured out. And it's less health conscious. I know this is a big deal, but I'm self-service nachos, nacho fountain, nacho buffet.
Oh,
nacho idea. It's my idea.
Like if I have learned anything from the Golden Corral model,
Are you about to blast Golden Corral right to my face?
Not directly. I'm saying that people will get their hands in it. Like it'll get nasty.
Golden Corral, in all seriousness, is the site of my most shameful eatings. And I don't mean like I ate a lot. I mean, I did. That's not where the shame comes from. The shame comes from I have been to Golden Corral and I've seen things, Cody.
Unspeakable things.
And I've still eaten there. Okay, so story time. I mean, this is right here at the beginning of the pod. Before we even get it, this resembles more of our radio show, but story time. I'm in Wichita Falls, Texas. And because I'm visiting a family member who's in the military there, hanging out with them. And we went to Golden Corral. And it's like a Saturday, I think. And as soon as we walk into this Golden Corral, we're confronted with something in the airlock. You know, the distance, the little room between the front door and the door to get in. And in that airlock was a human turd. I know it was human because it was too big to be like a dog. I know what human turds look like. This was a human turd in the airlock. Now here's where my shame comes in. I keep walking inside to the Golden Corral and I eat there. They didn't even have they had no clean silverware. Like the employees were all ragged. You could tell they were a little angry. They had this like edge about them. Like they'd just gotten slammed and were busy and they had no silverware. So I got my food and then I had to ask an employee for silverware and they were really frustrated and kind of got mad with me. Just a minute. And then they had to go back to the back and wash the silverware. They came back quickly and that silverware didn't get washed. And that also did not deter me from eating.
They probably spit on your silverware.
Like that was one of those moments where I was like, I've just been dreaming of eating some Golden Corral all day and I'm not stopping. And I was sure I was going to get food poisoning. Didn't though. No food poisoning. Felt great the next day. But I ate at that Golden Corral. Like if you set up a what if episode, what if you walked into a Golden Corral, a little role play. What if you walked into a Golden Corral and in the airlock, there was a human turd sitting there on the floor. Nobody had cleaned it up. It looked like it'd been there for a bit. And then you went in and all the employees were mean. And then there was no silverware. Would you eat at this Golden Corral?
I probably would not have gone into the Golden Corral after the airlock.
Yeah. So my mind just works differently because immediately my mind went to, oh, why would someone do that? They were mad. They were really upset and angry with this Golden Corral. So they just dropped trow right there in the airlock and let one loose.
Well, I would have said, this person's mad, so it must be bad inside. Yeah. I'm gone.
Because let me be clear, this was not a child. This was a fully grown human, because only a fully grown human could have left a turd like this. And so once you start traveling down that road, you're like, oh, someone was so upset. They dropped a trowel, let one loose, dropped a kid off at the pool, except it wasn't a pool. It was the airlock floor at a Golden Corral. And then knowing they wouldn't be able to clean up afterwards. They were that mad.
So this is the Pop Culture Pastor podcast. We usually do not discuss food eateries to this extent and their cleanliness.
And I ate there. I still ate there, Cody. I'm deeply ashamed.
That is
seriously though. I can't believe I ate there. When I tell that story, there's something in my mind going, no, Dave, no, Dave.
You're better than this.
I'm clearly not. I think Dave now would definitely walk out.
Well, at least you have your moral compass now.
You're thinking, how old were you, Dave? 20, 21? It's like, no, I only had 2 kids back then instead of 4. I was a dad. It wasn't that long ago.
Oof.
Yeah, it's a definite oof. Anyways, yes, as Cody said, this is the Pop Culture Pastor podcast. Thank you for joining us this week. That was just a little aside. As funny as that is, though, the news we need to talk about is there's a fair amount of poo slinging going on.
Ew.
Yeah. You know what I'm poo slinging in the figurative sense, not literal.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
That's good.
For whatever reason, there was just a lot of stories in the last week or two with people throwing shade at each other. We'll use a better metaphor. How about that?
Thank you.
David Harbour from Stranger Things was trained in classical American method acting. That's what he was trained in. He did this interview for Variety, but he says he no longer believes in the process or uses it during filming. David Harbour for playing Jim Hopper on Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because some of the things we've talked about are the ridiculousness of method acting. We talk about a lot about Jared Leto on the set of Morbius.
It's Morbin time.
He said, when I was younger, it's so embarrassing, but I remember playing that famous Scottish king and being like, I'm going to go kill a cat or something. I'm going to go murder something to know what it feels like to murder. He says, I didn't actually do it, obviously. But then he gets around to this idea. Not only is method acting stuff silly, that it's dangerous and it actually doesn't produce good work. He's not wrong.
There is an exception to every rule.
Yeah.
And that is Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay. So
and that's the only exception.
So in his interview, they cite Daniel Day-Lewis, and he says he's an extraordinary actor who I'm captivated and fascinated by. But when he explains his process, it sounds like nonsense to me. He threw shade at Daniel Day-Lewis.
How dare you?
I think you're right, though. I think, for every Daniel Day-Lewis, though, there's 10 Jared Letos.
Oh, easily, if not more. I would say Daniel Day-Lewis is an outlier in his method acting success.
Mm-hmm.
Him and De Niro.
Yeah. Well, and he goes on to say in this interview, he says it's bull explicative. He says it's BS. He says, but preparation you can take into insanity. And I feel like he's talking about someone in particular here. He says, what if it's a blank film? And he inserts a curse word. What do you think you achieved? Am I impressed that you didn't drop character? You should have dropped it from the beginning. How do you? And I feel like maybe he's talking because the Morbius thing's been in the news a lot. That's been one of the big headlines. Is he talking directly about Jared Leto right now? That's what I want to know. Does Hopper hate the Leto?
I hope so.
It's not Morbin time for Jim Hopper. It's definitely not Morbin time. I don't, it is weird because I think if you're a good actor, do you really need to do that?
I would think that you'd be able to flip a switch.
I would think so too. The way I've always thought about it and the way I've always read people like who are actors describe it is you got to access something in your memory to access certain feelings that you're portraying, certain things you're doing. And yeah, I don't understand why you got to pretend like you're living in it, right?
Oh, yeah.
For great amounts of time beforehand.
And how do you pretend to be a living vampire?
Well, ask Jared Leto. Well, first I start by never breaking character. So if the script calls for me to be crippled, I'm going to be crippled. I'm going to hold up production every time I need to go to the bathroom for about 40 minutes.
As one does.
Which every person who's handicapped goes like, dude, I can go to the bathroom the same amount of time you can, Leto. What are you even talking about right now? He's ableist. Let's get that started. Someone hit Twitter. Leto is ableist.
Well,
you heard it here first. Okay, but this wasn't the only shade being thrown around this week. Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke, who is the bad guy in Iron Man 2. He was in the very critically acclaimed The Wrestler. That was probably his big one. In a new interview with Piers Morgan, which I feel like if you're going to say something inflammatory, you probably go on Piers, right?
You should.
Rourke was asked about his opinions on the recent success of Top Gun Maverick, which took everyone by surprise because they're like, "What? Why are you asking Mickey Rourke about Top Gun?" Here's what he says. Rourke claimed that commercial success don't mean anything to him. And then he starts laying into Tom Cruise's body of work, saying that he's been profiting from the same kind of work. That doesn't mean bleep to me. I put in the bleep. This guy's been doing the same thing for 35 years. I got no respect for that. I don't care about money and power, he says. I care about when I watch Al Pacino work and Chris Walken and De Niro's early work and Richard Harris's work and Ray Winston's work. That's the kind of actor I want to be. Monty Clift and Brando back in the day. And he pointed out that Cruise will never reach the levels set by those aforementioned legends.
Okay.
He really went in on Tom.
Although I will say like half that list that he listed off, towards the end of their careers, those people were just cashing checks.
Yeah. You just watched The Island of Dr. Moreau with Brando.
So Brando,
he won a Razzie.
Pacino, there's like the past 15 years, I have not gone and seen a Pacino film where I'm like, this is a quality script and quality acting.
Yeah. Like when does that start? Is it Devil's Advocate? When Pacino starts like Devil's Advocate, where he plays literally the devil, and he's like, I'm the devil. I'm out. I'm out, Pacino.
So, yeah, I'm not trying to cast shade, but I'm saying like that list, there's some flaws with it. And that if you know what genre or film type you do great work in, and for Cruise, it has primarily been the more action-y flicks, although he was hilarious in Tropic Thunder. So I would say he's not done just strictly one type of film genre, but he's also not in like your Citizen Kane-esque movies where you're like, oh, this is highbrow stuff, unless you count Interview with the Vampire as highbrow.
I tend to think that this sort of thing is silly. Yeah, I mean, are we going to sit here and pretend that Tom Cruise doesn't have talent? Is that what Mickey Rourke wants us to do? Because I feel like this lines up with the music industry in a lot of ways, because you get a lot of like, oh, they sold out. Because why? Because they had some commercial success on an album.
Mm-hmm.
And is it wrong? Well, I don't understand. Okay, so like, Tom Cruise is a weird example because he's not exactly paying for a family. Although him and Nicole Kidman had children, right? Or did they not?
Oh, yeah. They had our kids, and him and Katie had a daughter.
Yeah. Okay. So like, is it wrong for him to say, hey, I'm going to do some movies that I know will be commercial successes? And yeah, they're not They're not Shakespeare in the Park.
Yeah.
But Shakespeare in the Park, you ain't getting paid like that.
So literally there's a scene in Annie Hall where Woody Allen is talking with one of his friends that's moved out to LA, and Woody's like, you used to mean something. You did Shakespeare in the Park. And he's like, I did Shakespeare in the Park and I got robbed in the park. Now I'm getting paid and I am successful.
Well, it's a weird thing we do to each other in our own professions, in our own areas of expertise, because like, listen, I've never acted professionally, but it's something I always thought would be fun to try. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this. I have in the mirror done the soliloquy from Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come here not to bury Caesar, right? Or not to praise Caesar, but to bury Caesar, right? You know, that whole thing where you're doing Shakespeare and it's a soliloquy and it's so subtly nuanced and there's emotions being portrayed inside of this that are just amazing because it's Shakespeare. But also, it's fun to get in the mirror and go, you talking to me? You talking to me? You must be talking to me because I don't see anyone else here, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's fun to get in the mirror and say, pretend someone said, I love you, and you say, I know. You know, like, I guess my point is, aren't you doing this because you love doing it?
Oh, yeah. In which, to be honest, Tom Cruise probably could have retired 20 years ago and lived off his money till the very end of his time, and his kids would still have plenty of money to burn through, and grandkids would. So I assume he really is passionate about the projects that he's doing. Like
every actor in Top Gun that rode in fighter jets as part of their job, they're going to remember that for the rest of their lives. I think that was a pretty awesome experience for them that they'll remember.
Oh, so I have some news, Top Gun 2 related.
Oh, okay.
And this is going to blow your mind.
All right. Blow my mind. Do it.
So Sanford Panitch, Sony Pictures president, there's so much press about Top Gun right now. It's like the movie business is back. In a weird way, I would say Top Gun is benefiting from us taking our shot. Venom is the start of that story that allows Top Gun to do the kind of business it did. These things don't happen overnight. It's a seeding. So Venom 2 paved the way for Top Gun 2.
That was the president of Sony?
Yes.
He is certifiably insane. What are you even talking about? What? That dude, listen, narcissism is like, your narcissism is eating itself. Like, it's like the snake that's eating its own tail at this point. Your ego it's like eating your brain, and so you're saying things that don't make any sense. What does Venom 2 have to do with Top Gun 2? Nothing.
That it launched a successful sequel during the pandemic, Dave. And because Venom 2 crawled, Top Gun could run.
I will say Top Gun 2, he's right about Top Gun 2 being the death knell of what they thought was the new movie experience. That it was all going to go streaming. Nope. Top Gun 2 is the absolute death knell to that. We like seeing movies in theaters. That's the true story.
Especially with, like, I feel action movies really benefit from a theater experience because of, like, the level of sound you get, the imagery being on a huge screen. So, yeah.
Well, that's wild. That was a little aside because we're not quite done with actors throwing shade at each other yet.
Oh, my goodness.
There was another one. Yeah. We're not done. I'm telling you, it was a weird week. Brian Cox, Agamemnon from Troy. You remember him?
Not even going to attempt to say his name from Troy. So
he's like one of the most expensive gets on Cameo.
He is.
If you want Brian Cox to wish your mom happy birthday, you're going to pay $800 to do it. $800. Veteran actor Brian Cox went in on a couple things, one of which was Quentin Tarantino and also against Johnny Depp. Cox said this: personable though I'm sure he is, He's so overblown, so overrated. Talking about Depp. I mean, Edward Scissorhands, let's face it, if you come on with hands like that and pale scarred face makeup, you don't have to do anything. And he didn't. And subsequently, he's done even less.
Oh, burn.
What is why are the actors going in on each other? Man.
I like to think he's Team Amber because he went straight to the Edward Scissorhands, in which she did during the trial, because she's like, he convinced half of or a lot of America that he had scissors for hands. And it's like, why would you go to that movie of all his movies?
Wait, she said what?
She said it during the trial.
I think Tim Burton did that.
And then, like, why is Brian going to Edward Scissorhands? The dude's been in bigger projects before and after.
I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but it does seem to be like this. I'm a real actor and I'm like an art. It's all about the art, right? Mickey Rourke. Now this guy, who's Brian Cox, it's all about the art, right? And now he's launching into Johnny Depp and Mickey Rourke launching into Tom Cruise. Two guys who just happen to be two of our most successful actors. They made the most money. Their movies make a ton of money. So I think there's like some envy, some jealousy going on here. But then he moves on to Quentin Tarantino, claiming that Tarantino's entire shtick was to, quote, double down on art house action gimmicks without providing anything of real substance. He said he even walked out of a screening of one of Tarantino's most popular works. He said this, quote, I find his work meretricious.
Don't even know how to spell that.
I'm looking at the word. I don't even know what it means. In that sentence, all I heard was Brian Cox is pretentious. So I need you to look up the word meretricious for me.
I have.
Okay.
So it's an adjective. Apparently attractive, but having in reality no value or integrity.
So it's cotton candy. He's saying the same thing I do when I say it's cotton candy. It has no substance.
Or another definition is it's archaic.
Oh, I think he meant the cotton candy one. So he called Quentin Tarantino cotton candy. Well, it's tasty cotton candy, sir.
Although I will agree that like he does have a shtick.
Oh yeah, and it was tasty in 1995.
Yeah,
for sure. If that from about 95 to 2005, it was pretty tasty. But yeah, if what you're telling me is it was a shtick that got old, okay, sure.
I don't disagree. Like I'll still watch Tarantino films if he comes out with any more. But for a while, it's like, okay, so now this is Kill Bill, but in the Wild West.
I thought Django Unchained was a great movie. I like that one.
But he does get great actors to act in his movies,
Yeah.
and so I can't tell all the time if it's just because like I really like this because this actor did a phenomenal job with the character he's given, or am I just a fan of the Tarantino genre?
So this is my observation from these things because this happens from time to time, and guys like Brian Cox and Mickey Rourke, where they attack someone who's pretty successful and they've made money. There's always this like hot tension between like your true artists and the people that they would say, quote, sell out and make money. Here's what I would say about Quentin Tarantino, Tom Cruise, both. It looks to me like they're having fun. Like,
yeah.
They look like they do what they do because they enjoy it. Tom Cruise, I think Tom Cruise enjoys making Mission Impossible movies. He likes running and jumping and doing his own stunts. I think he does that because he likes it. And I'd say the same with Tarantino. Tarantino's making movies that he just likes. That's why they all seem the same, because that's what he likes to do.
Yeah. And again, if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. No one's forcing you to go watch the newest Tarantino movie.
Right. Yeah. And so what I would say to guys like Mickey Rourke And what I would say to guys like Brian Cox, and to a larger extent, a more broad extent, guys like Martin Scorsese, when they bash Marvel movies, I'm like, you guys don't seem like you're having fun with your quote unquote art. It doesn't seem like fun to you. And that makes me sad for you. I'm sad for them because for them, it's like this artiste vibe they have to uphold. And I'm like, oh, that's so sad. You should have enjoyed your life and your work more.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Rejoice in what you do and what you toil in under the sun.
Yeah. We're gonna get ready to do our main topic. It's a Be Kind Rewind here on the pod. We're gonna talk about The Dark Knight Rises, but first we're gonna let Sam lay it down, give us some weird trivia and facts about The Dark Knight Rises. Cody, to the Geek Phone!
The Geek Phone.
Hello?
Hey. This isn't Sam. Who's this?
Is this Dave from Pop Culture Pastor?
It is.
Okay. You're looking for who?
Sam, but you're clearly not Sam. I think I dialed the wrong geek number.
Yeah, this isn't Sam. Sorry.
All right. That's a bummer. I think you only get one shot at this geek phone thing.
Yeah, I think I blew it.
All right.
So, okay. All right, well.
Have a nice day.
You too, Dave.
The Dark Knight Rises. That's why we're here, Cody.
That is why we're here.
To talk.
And
Go ahead.
this is the 10th anniversary week.
It is. It is the 10th anniversary week. So I just figured we could go over some of the particulars first. First of all, laundry list of stars in this movie. Christian Bale, Tom Hardy, Anne Hathaway, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Gary Oldman, Marion Cotillard, and Michael Caine, just to name a few.
And John Nolan.
Who's John Nolan?
He's a British actor, but he also happens to be, wait for it, Christopher Nolan's uncle.
Well, I mean, that seemed obvious. Seemed obvious that he would be related.
It does, doesn't it?
Since, he's in the movie and the movie's done by Christopher Nolan and I've never heard of him.
And I mean, just think that you left off Sir Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman from that list.
I said Michael Caine. He was the last person I mentioned, literally.
He should be Sir Michael Caine in everyone's book.
Yeah, my point was that there was a lot of people in the movie. I wasn't going to name them all.
Cillian Murphy.
Oh my gosh. Cillian Murphy's in it for like 2 minutes.
It's a very vital point, but
Is it?
it is.
Is it?
It is.
Is it?
He's the only villain to appear in all three. He is.
Is it? I'm just messing with you. Oh, it's got an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's a pretty high rating. Here's a little bit of the summary. It's been 8 years since Batman, in collusion with Commissioner Gordon, vanished into the night. Assuming responsibility for the death of Harvey Dent, Batman sacrifices everything for what he and Gordon hoped would be the greater good. However, the arrival of a cunning cat burglar, played by Anne Hathaway, and a merciless terrorist named Bane, played by Tom Hardy, force Batman out of exile and into a battle he may not be able to win. Cody, this grossed $1.08 billion.
I helped it do that, so I'm proud of myself.
At the time, it was the number, I want to say it was like the number 7 highest grossing movie ever. It was, the film grossed over $1 billion. 7th highest grossing film of all time at the time of its release, as well as the 3rd highest grossing film of 2012. 3rd?
What else came out in 2012?
Yeah, no joke. It was only the 3rd highest grossing movie in 2012.
Actually, Avatar probably came out.
No. It was a different A movie. A little movie called The Avengers. The Avengers was number 1 with 1.5 billion worldwide. And we forget how much those early ones made. You'll never guess the number 2. This grossed more than The Dark Knight Rises. Skyfall. James Bond.
That was at the peak of all things Daniel Craig.
And then right behind The Dark Knight Rises, also making $1 billion worldwide, was The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey.
That was a good year for cinema.
It was. Lots of box office hits. The Amazing Spider-Man's down at number 7 somehow. And The Hunger Games came out that year as well, down at number 9. So 2012 was a big year for movies. And The Dark Knight Rises comes out. And let's just talk about like our broad thoughts about the movie first and foremost. I'll let you go first because you're a huge Dark Knight fan.
Okay, so broad thoughts. First, amazing. Second, like
this movie?
Yeah, this movie was amazing.
Okay.
And I don't know if The Dark Knight did not exist, this might be DC's best movie to date. If The Dark Knight does not exist.
Well,
and also the Batman. You have to take the Batman out.
According to our fan-voted best comic book movies of all time, they would agree with you because Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises were the two movies left standing in the DC other side of the bracket.
Oh, yeah. And so I thoroughly enjoyed this one. And, so I remember watching it in theaters, and I saw it back-to-back days. And the only complaint I had back then, and I don't think I'd have that issue today because theater technology has gotten better, is you couldn't understand Bane or Batman at times.
Oh, man, no, it's worse. Okay, so I watched this last night. It's fresh. And so I had to toy around with the volume constantly because I was watching it with my older kids. It was late, so like my wife had already gone up to bed, and I didn't want the TV to be too loud. But the dialogue in the film you had to have up to a certain volume. But so they went back and redid all the Bane dialogue, right, and some of the Batman dialogue because people in the screenings complained, and when they came back and did that, the Bane dialogue was so much louder than the rest of the dialogue. So you'd have the volume up to try and hear the other normal dialogue, and then Bane would come on and be like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Whoa, what in the world, man?" So the volume, because they had to adjust that dialogue, they almost adjusted too much. Where Bane is super loud in the film.
Although I would think that his mask would be kind of echoey.
Yeah. So it comes off sounding, it sounds unnatural. I will say it. So this was things I didn't notice when I first watched it. His voice was interesting and cool when I first watched it.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Like, so throughout like the following week, I'm doing Batman and Bane impersonations because both have like distinct voices. And I'm like, oh yes, I wonder what would break first, your spirit or your body.
Very nice.
Your body.
Very nice.
Very nice. Yeah. So I love this movie. No, this movie's great. The chases are extreme, and you get a glimpse of why Batman is very problematic as a hero at times because he naturally attracts bigger and worse villains each time he goes out.
Yeah.
And he also distracts the police. They can't do their jobs.
So I remember really liking this movie when it came out, and I still like it. But I think time in certain areas has not been kind to it. Specifically, just finding out what could have been. So
yeah, don't go down that rabbit hole.
There's some interesting stuff here if you look into how they had to change what they had planned. So in 2005, way back in 2005, David Goyer, who's the guy who writes the screenplay, he confirmed that he wrote treatments for 2 films involving the Joker. So there would have been 2 movies involving Heath Ledger's Joker. The first would involve Batman, Harvey Dent, and Commissioner Gordon hunting down the Joker, which is kind of like what we get in the first one. While the second one would have been the Joker scarring Dent, turning him into Two-Face during his trial. And the third treatment ends in the same way as the final version of The Dark Knight Rises. But other aspects of that obviously were incorporated into The Dark Knight. Heath Ledger's family stated that he was planning on reprising his role as the Joker before he died. So like that seems to confirm that, yes, there was definitely going to be a version of this movie that where the Joker is kind of the mastermind, which, so like knowing all this and knowing that the story could have been different and knowing you could have had the Joker and Bane. So like, I'm assuming all the League of Shadows, Ra's al Ghul stuff would not have been in the movie.
No, because Bane's origins, he's not connected to the League of Shadow, or he's not connected to Ra's initially because he is on an island near Cuba and like his dad's in jail and he was born in the jail and that's why he's in the hole.
Yeah.
So like he's raised down there and then gets injected with the serum as a trial person and he actually survives the trial where most people died.
Yeah. And so Heath Ledger's death really alters what this movie was going to be. And I think like in hindsight, you can go through this and like when I was watching the movie last night, you pick out, it's easier to pick out the things where like, oh man, they were just scrambling. They were just trying to make this story work apart. And knowing it wasn't their original idea makes you be able to kind of see that a little bit. You kind of see the loopholes, the gaps in the story. This is interesting here because they had to change the story. And this is interesting pertaining to current events and the new Black Panther movie with Chadwick Boseman. So Chadwick Boseman passes. And there's a legion of fans out there who want them to recast because they just love the character of T'Challa and they think they should recast. But Christopher Nolan, particularly said he was not going to recast the role out of respect for the performance of Heath Ledger. And so this has happened before.
Yeah. And when that happened, there were a lot of fans still outcrying for a new Joker because they knew what potential stories could be. But there was also a lot of fans like, oh, you can't touch the Joker ever again. This is probably the best version of the Joker. And it still withstands the test of time.
Yeah, nothing against Chadwick Boseman, who's a fabulous actor. He was great, but he wasn't asked to do as much with the character of T'Challa as Heath was asked to do with the Joker. I mean, the Joker becomes a version of the Joker we've really never seen.
Yeah.
He's like his own unique version, and it's just iconic in a way that a lot of the Marvel characters aren't asked to be because they're more, they're more group films. They're not about one person giving a performance like that.
Just think, Heath took on a role that Jack Nicholson had.
Yeah. And Jack Nicholson really put his own spin on it and was allowed to by Tim Burton, who's already kind of out there.
Oh yeah.
So of course he would let his actors just go with it. And Jack definitely does. And it's a very Jack Nicholson-y Joker in a lot of ways.
But that's like a huge name that you're going to be compared to no matter what.
Right. Right.
And so there's all that pressure added.
Yeah. But he's still kind of jokey in that movie. It's still kind of played for like nervous laughter, I would say, whereas Heath Ledger's definitely not. I mean, you were supposed to be frightened by Heath Ledger's Joker, which I think they did. I also found it interesting in some of my studying here that following the success of the Joker in The Dark Knight, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. Studio executives, so the Warner Brothers folks, were wanting the Riddler to be the primary villain as he was considered a similar character and were encouraging the casting of Leonardo DiCaprio. So let's talk about this for a second because The most recent The Batman movie was I loved it. I thought it was a great movie. I actually thought Paul Dano's performance was really good. My one complaint, if you remember, was they changed the Riddler's character in a way to make him just Joker-like. He's essentially Joker 2.0, which is not like the comic book version of the Riddler. And I felt like that was like the only part of the film I didn't like. And so you wonder how much of the story was the guy's idea and how much of it was Warner Brothers saying, no, the Riddler must be the villain. Because Warner Brothers is going to Warner Brother, bro.
As they do. But, I mean, DiCaprio?
Nah, I'm not here for it. Especially if you're just going to make Riddler Joker 2.0. That movie would have been tons worse.
I don't know if Nolan would have allowed it to go full Joker, though.
Yeah. It's just, I just pointed that out to show you that Warner Brothers been Warner Brothering for a long time.
They're jabronis. No offense.
But overall, I really liked it when it came out. And last night, my overall feeling was the narrative of this movie is so strange. It's so odd. Batman is not in it for large swaths of the movie. Like, do you know it's about an hour before you see him on the screen?
Well, as it should be.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because he has become a recluse. And so I think that it's great storytelling to not have the Batman at all until, like, it's a dire situation and then, boom, break the bat.
Granted, I'm not going to argue with you on that. I'm not saying I disagree. It's just an interesting narrative choice, especially considering we're hearing rumors now that Marvel Studios was mandating that Thor come in under 2 hours. Like there's rumors breaking right now that they told Taika Waititi, your movie's going to come in under 2 hours, 2 hours or less. They mandated it. It seems weird because while I say the narrative's strange, I think it's not that I didn't appreciate it. Like you said, we come to a point in this story where Bruce Wayne is kind of broken. The Batman is exiled. And it makes sense for him to not be around. And frankly, it's kind of a while before you see Bruce Wayne in the movie. So the movie is about 2 hours and 40 minutes long. So it's a longer movie anyways. But it's just, I just wanted to point out that there's an interesting narrative structure that goes on here. Because my kids were asking a lot of questions because they don't, I mean, it's a 2 hour and 40 minute long movie, but they don't spend a lot of time rehashing what's going on.
Don't need to.
And my children are like goldfish. They don't remember like what happened 15 minutes ago. So like I had to kind of pause the movie. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to hear and refresh them. Like, hey, if you remember the end of the last movie, they pretended that Batman had been the one to kill Harvey Dent so that Gotham would still have this idea that Harvey was their hero. And so once I explained it to them, they were fine, but they don't do a lot of context for that.
No, I mean, you get Gary Oldman reading off a letter talking about Harvey a little bit, but then that's it.
It's kind of confusing in the way they do it because he's like, you hear him giving a speech but the video doesn't line up. It's clearly like you're just in his head.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Anyways, let's move on to our favorite scenes. Let's talk about favorite scenes. I'll let you go first because
okay,
you're such a lover of the Dark Knight.
Within the Dark Knight trilogy, all the fight scenes are shown from the point of view of the villains. So it's usually quick pace, disorienting, watching it. Not when Batman's fighting Bane, because he's amongst the initiated, as we all like to say. And so, like, it's crystal clear, and it almost appears to be in slow motion, because, like, Bane is well aware what Batman's doing. Of course, he was trained by Ra's al Ghul as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so my favorite scene, and it's the only time I have ever rooted against Batman in a movie or in the comics.
You're going straight to your favorite scene of the whole movie first.
My favorite scene the whole movie first is when Bane breaks the bat.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so epic.
Well, and it's an amazing scene the way it's framed. And at no time do you think Batman has a chance. I mean, they make it clear from the start, this is not going to go well for him. He seems hopelessly outstrengthed, out-techniqued, and he's like just wailing away on Bane, it's not even affecting him.
No, not at all. And again, if it is being seen through the lens of Bane, compared to the lenses of all the other villains and street level thugs that Batman's fighting, Bane is not being bothered one iota by Batman throwing flash grenades or bombs and having smoke everywhere. No, not messing with him.
And they frame it well because Catwoman, played by Anne Hathaway, is kind of the stand-in for the audience here, because you can see her being kind of horrified at what's taking place. She's just sold him out, not because she didn't care about him, but because she's desperate for this clean slate thing, which is sort of a red herring in the movie to explain her motivations, which is fine. I don't call it a red herring to insult it. It just is what it is. She needed that in place for you to understand her motives. And so she sells him out and puts him in this situation, but then observes the whole thing and is clearly horrified by the situation. And she becomes like the proxy for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was all like, there's things that Nolan does where he frames the scene that are just masterful. And I thought that was one of them.
Oh yeah.
And things I didn't notice when I watched it the first time.
And the dialogue in that scene is great, because that's where he does the quote that I did earlier. And he also talks about how he was, he didn't adopt the shadows. He was born into the darkness or shadows. And like, like I could just watch that scene on repeat.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about Tom Hardy later, to be sure. But one of my favorite scenes right off the bat is the opening airplane sequence. So,
that's a good one.
The movie starts off with, of course, the little bit of exposition they give you through Commissioner Gordon, but then goes right to the tarmac of a CIA agent who's taking in some prisoners, right? Some terrorists, and you learn through the dialogue that they've been hired. They're thugs of this guy named Bane. And then in the airplane, you learn that Bane is there, and you learn it by, he starts talking. He's got that unique sounding voice, but that whole sequence is, as I was watching it again last night, full disclosure, I probably hadn't watched this movie in at least 5 years. That scene is crazy bonkers, Cody.
Oh, it is.
Like the stunts they had to pull off for that scene are amazing. There's plane gymnastics. I mean, literally one plane is dragging the other plane and the wings get ripped off and they're hanging in what's left of the hull of the other plane that's getting dragged. And Bane is like through all of this, just kind of almost like a monkey. He's like slinging himself around. He looks agile and strong. And you're just like, this dude is formidable.
And his logic within that scene, because I don't know if you put me in the plane and I hear a gunshot that I don't assume that they just killed the guy. Instead, he's like, well, I wondered why someone would shoot a person when they're throwing them out of a plane.
Yeah, it's just an amazing scene. And like, yeah, he is really great in that scene, just as the introduction to Bane, because the voice, everything just lines up so well with him being just this guy. And you see it in like the fear on, I can't remember the name of the actor, but he was in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
He's playing the CIA agent, and he's just wonderful in that scene. But really, really a great scene for me.
Yeah. That one is phenomenal. Like, that would probably be my second favorite scene in the whole movie.
I'm just a big fan of an opening set piece. Like an opening action sequence in these movies is so amazing. And if you're going to also use it to like introduce us to a character, then what Nolan does in this scene, like this is just masterful, because look what we get in this scene. We get, first of all, an action sequence that blows you away. It's not your run of the mill action sequence. You get the intelligence of the operation of Bane. You get the fear factor of like, this dude's formidable and has no conscience. He's just willing to do what it takes to get done. And he's willing to back up everything he says. Like, he's a formidable opponent.
Like, I shouldn't enjoy this part, but I enjoyed this part. Like, he leaves that one guy to die with the plane. He's like, this is for the cause, brother.
Yes, right. For the cause, you know, like,
yeah. So it's great.
And in that scene, when his voice first rings out, when he's got the shroud over his head still, oh man, immediately you realize there's some, like, you almost look at the dudes in the plane and be like, how come you're not reacting more to like this dude? That sounded strange. Like, that should have, because it sticks out like a sore thumb when you're watching it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Immediately you're given that gravitas of like, oh, this isn't just some lackey. This is the Bane.
In which, I mean, so The Dark Knight starts off with the heist at the bank, in which you don't get, or you don't know it's the Joker until deep into the heist.
Yeah.
But he's there the whole time. And so this is something that Nolan does really well.
Yeah, it's a pattern. And it's the same. I would argue the same, that first of all, in The Dark Knight, it's an amazing action sequence, but you get this introduction to a character so well within the action sequence that it's just, that's masterful storytelling. And you're right, Nolan's just really good at it. He started off 2 movies the same way, and I don't even care. I would take that every time.
I mean, literally, when you see Bane, you're like, oh, this is going down for real. Because at first, when it was announced that Tom Hardy was going to be Bane and that this is going to be a Bane Batman movie, I'm like, are they actually going to break the bat in this movie? Because, I mean, that's an iconic scene within the comic books, within Nightfall. But as soon as the plane sequence happens, I'm like, oh, they might do this.
Yeah.
And so, like, I had built myself up in my first viewing of watching it. Yeah, that's a great scene. I also like the scene where Talia al Ghul reveals herself finally, and the look of surprise Batman has that it wasn't Bane that made it out of the pit, but it was Talia. Bane didn't see the light of day till he was an adult.
Yeah.
And so, like, anytime you can surprise the world's greatest detective, it's a good moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. Do you want me to go, or do you want to give another favorite scene?
You got it.
Okay. The next thing that I really enjoyed in my rewatch last night was Joseph Gordon-Levitt is fantastic in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And he's sort of an afterthought. People don't really remember his performance or really his storyline. And I'm here to tell you it's quality. It's really good.
Oh, yeah. Because he's an orphan, just like the Bruce Wayne. And he's brought up within an orphanage that was supported by the Waynes, But then all of a sudden, money stops coming in.
Yeah. And so the first sequence between Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Wayne, I believe this would be, is this where after he gets robbed?
I think so.
He's having some sort of function at his house and the Catwoman robs his safe.
Yeah, takes his mom's pearls.
Yeah, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Wayne have this conversation that I don't even remember the gist of actually what they're saying, but there's a lot of unspoken things being understood by both men and understanding of where they come from and what it means to be an orphan, to grow up that way. And they start speaking into like each other's lives and memories a little bit, because Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, Blake, says to him things like, you know, there's the anger, you know, I can't remember what he says, but he says something along the lines of there's this just burning anger that never really goes away. You practice smiling in the mirror, you know, so you can teach yourself how to do it, so you can see it. And people always tell you it's time to get over it, but you never really do.
Yeah.
And oh man, that scene was really, really effective. And again, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is such an afterthought kind of in this movie, but putting those two on screen together for that moment and in a couple other moments they have makes you long for what might have been.
Oh yeah. If there had been a follow-up movie, which the way this one ends, there shouldn't be, but if there had been,
yeah, it
definitely could have led to something that my friend George Clooney failed at.
So you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Christian Bale in a room in a scene together, and I thought that was wonderful, and I loved every minute of it.
That should be, yeah. Joseph Gordon-Levitt did a phenomenal job in that movie. And I remember the first time I watched it, I really liked his performance, but as time goes on, he is an afterthought just because you do have so much Christian Bale, Tom Hardy, like big scenes that happen. And then like they kind of force Selena Kyle to be a bigger role than almost necessary, I feel, but that's me. So
yeah, what's your next favorite scene?
Oh, so I think it's the last battle.
Yeah,
and once Batman with like the claws that are on his arm pad, I don't know what you call it, but hook into Bane's mask and rip open the tubes, you can see how the fight sequence changes significantly, because now Bane is in extreme pain. Which
he doesn't have the same focus. He starts flailing wildly.
So it definitely again alters it's a Nolan thing that you see the fight perspective through the villain's eyes, and it changes dramatically. And then, of course, the hero wins the day. So
the interesting part of that last fight scene between Batman and Bane too is that Batman subdues him somewhat, but he is long from winning that fight. It takes Talia stabbing him with a knife and twisting it because he's standing over Bane, but it's clear Bane's, I mean, he's still formidable. That fight was going to go on. It is the interruption by Talia that turns that tide. And then Bane kind of relaxes. He's just sitting there for the remainder of that scene as Talia kind of exposits the needed information.
Oh yeah.
Which, like, listen, I think the great thing about a filmmaker is like whenever I get unnecessary exposition. So like there's a scene with one of the bad guys. It's not even the bad guy. It's like a lackey of the bad Wayne board member, right?
Oh,
and he like unnecessarily exposits all this stuff. I think the mark of a really good filmmaker, like a guy like Nolan, is that he can do that and make it feel like it's not so glaring.
Yeah.
Because I was all ready to say that was dumb and I didn't like it. But you know what? It didn't bother me all that much because he did it in such a way that it kind of fit. It wasn't a glaring jolt to have them exposit a little information.
It was almost M. Night-esque.
Yeah.
With the twist.
The Batcopter is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Just glorious. From the second he says it's not a car. Like, I think the little child in all of this was like, it's the Batcopter. And it's, of course, cool in that Chris Nolan sort of way where it's not really a helicopter as we know it and love it. But it has a rotor on the bottom side. It looks very military, experimental technology like stuff.
Which in this Batman universe, Wayne Tech has a lot of military contracts. So it makes sense that he would have access to all this stuff.
Right. It's R&D, right?
Yeah.
It's research and development, which means they're going to have access to not your run-of-the-mill military equipment, but all the experimental stuff, which is cool.
Which then leads to an issue unless the United States government's just like, oh, we know that this has to be someone at Wayne Tech.
Yeah, right. It's a little bit of a plot hole. You'd think they'd be able to figure that out pretty quickly, but anyways. Also, any favorite scene of mine is any scene where Michael Caine gets choked up.
Oh, yeah. There was tears galore.
Oh, my goodness. That scene at the end where they're at the grave and Bruce Wayne's headstone is new and you see Martha and Thomas Wayne's grave and he's like, I failed you. I failed you. I failed. It's Michael Caine. Like, listen, no disrespect to any Alfred that's ever been in that role because they've all been good in their own way. Michael Caine's the best. Michael Caine is fantastic. He's just wonderful.
Oh, I love the banter between him and Christian Bale about Rachel. And I'm like, move on, buddy.
Yeah, it's almost like they put that in the movie to make the end work.
Yeah.
So they can have that moment after they've been separated for a while. Like it was, we'll get there. We'll talk about the end, but it almost seems like, again, when Nolan inserts something that's just for the story's sake, when other directors do it, it might upset me more, but Nolan has a way of doing it in the story where it makes sense. He at least is thinking about that. And so it's less intrusive.
Yeah.
Any more favorite scenes? Anything you want to mention?
The Pittsburgh Steelers football team, like, most of them, I assume, died, except for Hines Ward.
Yeah, I don't think it ever really ran through my head that, like, about 100 NFL players just died in this scene. And we don't even, like, it didn't even enter in my brain the first time I watched it. Because you're watching Hines Ward outrun the collapsing field into the depths. And, oh, man. Yeah, when he turns around and he looks in, they're like, oh, boy, they all just died, didn't they?
Yep.
That was massive, and the special effects of that scene were amazing. Everything about that scene is gloriously perfect. From the young kids singing the Star Spangled Banner, Bane being very threatening, but then also taking the time to be like, what a lovely, lovely voice. Like it's just perfect. Everything about that scene is perfect. You're right. That's a great scene.
Plus, rest in peace, Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Pittsburgh Steelers making cameos, right?
Yeah. So I actually have met someone that was in this movie, Ben Roethlisberger. So
okay, I didn't know you'd met Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah. All right, yeah, he's in it for just the briefest moment. So they pan as the Star Spangled Banner is being sung. They pan through the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get all the actual Pittsburgh Steelers NFL players. Let's move on. Scenes that could have been better. Do you have scenes that were disappointing to you, Cody? Or things, I should say scenes or things about the movie.
So I almost want to say Selena Kyle as a whole?
Yeah, let's talk about this because that was number 1 on my list. So let's just join forces here because on my rewatch, like when I first watched this, obviously the only Catwoman we'd had was Michelle Pfeiffer.
Was Halle Berry
in a movie, right? And then I think maybe that movie had come out. So Halle Berry, but that movie was largely panned.
Yeah.
And it's a continuation kind of Pfeiffer's Catwoman. She's acting in the style of the Tim Burton Catwoman. Like she almost looks exactly like her other than, she's Halle Berry and the other one was Michelle Pfeiffer, but the suit's real similar. I mean, all of that is real similar. So that would have been the only thing we'd seen. And so Anne Hathaway playing Catwoman, I remember when I saw it, I don't know that I thought much about it. I thought she was fine. On rewatch last night, and especially after getting the version we just got from the Batman played by
Zoe Kravitz.
Oof, Cody. This is one that doesn't hold up. I'm not here to say it's all Anne Hathaway's fault because I think that's a terrible cast now. Brutal cast. The whole point of the Catwoman is that she is from the streets, right? She's from the other side of the tracks. She's downtrodden. She's been stepped on. Anne Hathaway, through no fault of her own, just looks like someone who's well-to-do.
So for me, the scene where she goes to get the clean slate card or whatever and then has to fight the 2 gentlemen and then Batman shows up and all that jazz. That scene, she does a great job fighting, but like anytime she has dialogue.
Oh, the one-liners are so clunky.
They are. I really don't like it when she has the line about how could you all think you could take so much and leave us with so little?
Okay. Yeah, but that's exactly my point. It's not believable. And again, it's no fault. It's not Anne Hathaway's fault. Mm-hmm. Like, I just never believe as I'm watching the movie that she could possibly be from the streets, from this, the other side of the tracks. I can't look at her and think she looks way too glamorous. And just because of the way she is and the other parts she's had in movies, I suppose, the context, we know Anne Hathaway, I really think this is just really bad casting.
Yeah. I mean, she has a big name.
She's the Princess Diaries, for goodness sakes, right? Like, the whole thing is like, she looks like royalty. Like, I just can't believe it. I can't get on board with it.
You almost could have switched her and Marion roles, and I think it might have been better.
Yeah, maybe so. And that's like, again, it seems so weird. You might say, well, Dave, you're just kind of profiling. Are you saying that poor people can't look like Anne Hathaway? Like, no, of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're watching a movie, it's different.
And I really didn't like her delivery of the one-liners.
Oh, yeah.
So,
the clunkiest dialogue in the film, by far.
So she's the area that could have been better.
Yeah, the performance definitely didn't age well.
Yeah, her scenes, most of them could have been better, except for the fight scene that she had. It was pretty intense. I liked it.
Yeah. The only other thing I had on disappointing was that the plot feels weird a lot of the time. And of course, for a multitude of reasons we've talked about.
Oh, yeah. You could definitely tell that, especially when there's the party at Wayne Manor and Detective Gordon's giving his speech. It's like, you should be mentioning the Joker in here somewhere, because it just feels like this was a huge event. And yet we're only going to talk about Harvey Dent saved this city with the RICO case.
Well, it's funny too, because like they glorify the law, the Dent Act, right?
Yeah.
When in real life, if you know anything about history, we talk about the law of unintended consequences a lot. Well, it's because we make laws and then they get perverted to use for something else. Usually it's the government. So the government will overreach. So the people that get busted for RICO laws today are like people that go into factories wearing hidden cameras to expose some sort of wrongdoing. They get prosecuted with RICO laws. And that's just kind of like a microcosm of these laws we make, where like the RICO laws were made to catch gangsters, Al Capone, guys like that back in Prohibition. And so to see how we're using them today, that you can't not think about that if you know about history when they're glorifying the Dent Act.
Yeah.
And I like to think if they would have made a fourth movie, maybe we would have got to see that, where like some new politician as the district attorney was like warping what the Dent Act could do and using it wrongly.
Yeah, that one would have been a good storyline.
Anything else? I don't think I have anything else.
No, I don't have much beef with the movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. Let's move on to the greatest story ever told category. Biblical themes. Are there biblical things or allusions in the movie?
Christian Bale pulls a Jesus.
The hero story, as it often does, has to sacrifice, right?
He does. And literally, he has a helicopter type thing that needs some work done to it. You assume it hasn't been done to it. He has to take a nuclear device out of the city over the ocean.
Yeah. Everyone assumes, spoiler, that he actually sacrifices himself, which you find out in the last moment of the movie. He didn't.
Unless it was all a dream.
But it looks that way, and they actually set this up quite well, because there's actually a conversation between him and Catwoman where Catwoman is trying to convince him to leave with her. And she says, "You've given them everything." And he says, "Not everything, not yet." And almost in that moment, like I felt like he could have referenced, that there's no greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends.
Oh, yeah. And again, in weird dialogue, if you take it out of context, Lucius Fox has a conversation with Bruce Wayne, like, "Oh, someone needs to update this thing and fix it." And Bruce is like, "Yada, yada, yada, I'm rich." Mm-hmm. But then at the end of the film, you get the reveal of, oh, the log has Bruce Wayne working on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and there's the running theme of the film is, and like in a lot of hero stories, the hero's journey is sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Like there's several obvious and not so obvious allusions to the fact that Batman is going to sacrifice himself eventually. Well, there's a lot of allusions to him being almost suicidal.
Oh, yeah. And that's Alfred's number one problem.
Yes.
That he is just running into his own death.
Mm-hmm. But he knows Christian Bale, as evidenced by the "I haven't given them everything, not yet" line, is that he's willing to lay down his life for Gotham, for the people of Gotham. And so that's a running theme of the movie, obviously. There's also a moment where I believe it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. He's told to lead an exodus by Commissioner Gordon. Get him out of there. Lead an exodus. Get the people out of the cops out of the sewers.
That is another thing. There's a lot of least of these imagery within this one, because you not only have the poor social outcast with Selena Kyle and her crew, but you also have the mentioning of orphans with Drake. And there's just a lot of kind of class structure and in which, I mean, Drake and Bruce Wayne have the conversation of essentially, to whom much is given, much is required to give. And so, like, yeah.
Think about the end of the movie. So we're given as Nolan is tying up threads, we get Bruce Wayne, the reveal that Bruce Wayne is living happily ever after with the Catwoman, right? We get Alfred, who's clearly living his best life because he's going to this fancy place in Paris or wherever it's at, having a cocktail.
Yeah.
Every evening at sunset. And then the other people they tell us about are John Blake, who is the grown-up orphan.
He is.
And the other, do you remember what the other loose end tied up? There's one more thing they show us. Do you remember what it is in that montage at the end? It's the reading of Bruce Wayne's will and him giving Wayne Manor to the orphanage kids, the other orphan kids. So this is really a story about him literally sacrificing for the least of these.
So biblical movie.
Yeah.
Check.
Biblical stuff there. But more so, that's always been a theme of Batman because you put up Bruce Wayne against the juxtaposition of orphans and the poor. Remember in the first movie, much of the movie takes place and he has interactions with this kid who lives in the Downs or whatever it's called, which is supposed to be like the across the tracks of Gotham, right?
Yeah.
And so there's always that thing with Batman where they're constantly contrasting Bruce Wayne with the Batman and who he's drawn to, which is the least of these.
That is how Bruce was brought up.
It's good stuff. All right. Who wins the movie? Cody, I think we may have the same answer on this. This was one I thought, I didn't think we'd have a lot of disagreements in this, but I thought this one was a surefire 100%. Who wins this movie?
Okay, we might disagree. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
I'm going with Tom Hardy.
Oh, yeah.
It launches Tom Hardy into the stratosphere.
Tom Hardy, the amazing part about this is we've just had Heath Ledger give this his version of the Joker, and everybody's talking about that. And then almost kind of quietly, Tom Hardy steals this movie.
Just think, most of the movie, if not all the movie, you don't see Bane's whole face.
No.
He's just acting with his eyes.
Mm-hmm. And not his eyes and the inflection. So he bases his voice off of somebody that some Romanian guy.
Mm-hmm.
And his performance is fantastic. I remember thinking it was great when I first saw it, but last night I was watching it you forget that Tom Hardy's a great actor just because of the roles he takes and who he is. I mean, he was Mad Max. He has a bit part in Peaky Blinders that's really entertaining. He's just this guy that he's in Venom, of course. So he's in these bombastic kind of things, but the nuance and the subtleties of the little things he's doing with Bane didn't escape me as I was watching it last night. And I agree with you. I think he's 100% the winner of this movie. I think it launches him into the roles we just talked about.
Yeah, I loved him in this. Yeah. Phenomenal.
Yeah. Man, there's so many good performances in this movie.
I'd say Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a close second.
He's so good in this movie. He's so good. Gary Oldman's always good. Marion Cotillard is coming off an Oscar win, I believe, when this movie comes out.
Yeah.
So it's just timed right for her. But she was good. And of course, we've already talked about Michael Caine and how wonderful he is, even when he doesn't have a whole lot to do. He's not in this movie a whole lot.
Yeah, him and Morgan Freeman both aren't in it a lot, but yet their scenes, their time on the screen is memorable.
Yeah. The Go Get 'Em Next Time award. Is there a loser in the movie for you?
Her name's Anne Hathaway.
Yeah. And we kind of discussed this a lot already. What's your reasoning? Go ahead.
Again, I really think that she would have had to done a lot for me to believe her as Selena Kyle with the background story of growing up in poverty, those sorts of things. And she didn't meet that level, and her dialogue just really felt awful upon all my viewings of this movie.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I think tropes in movies and entertainment are obviously not a good thing. I don't like tropes, but at the same time, there are certain tropes that are there for a reason. There are certain reasons Sam Elliott gets the acting gigs he gets.
Because of his mustache.
Because he looks like a dude from the 1800s. He has the attitude. He has the look. And Sam Elliott could have been born to well-to-do parents. I don't know. But at the end of the day, he looks a certain way, and that makes him good for certain roles. So when I say this, I don't want people to misconstrue to say that I don't think poor people can look glamorous. But Anne Hathaway just has a glamorous beauty. She's very beautiful. And she's glamorous in a way, like through no fault, like without trying to be. She just looks like a glamorous beauty. She looks like someone you'd say, are they royalty? She just has that look.
Yeah. Again, it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, it makes for a very poor casting decision, in my opinion. And if we felt it a little bit when the movie came out, the rival of the Batman was Zoe Kravitz, who's also very beautiful, but has this quality about her where she like is almost grimy,
Well, her demeanor is a lot different than
right. And then, when I say grimy, I'm not saying the way she looks. I'm saying the way she acts out the character.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get it. She's street level. She's street smart. And at no time am I looking at Anne Hathaway's acting job she does in this. Am I convinced that she is a street level thief? Just at no time. And I don't think it's really her fault.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Not sorry.
So I would agree with that, although she's not my pick for loser of the film.
You better not say Cillian Murphy or we'll have beef.
No, it's not Cillian. Cillian doesn't have a lot to do.
He gets to be the judge towards the end of the film, which is kind of cool.
Here's my pick. It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Ouch!
Joseph Gordon-Levitt is one of the best things about this movie. He's the best thing about this movie. Great care is taken to set up his story where he's clearly being groomed to be Batman's Robin.
And you find out at the end his middle name is Robin.
The end scene where he's like the last thing you see in the movie, standing in the Batcave, it's genuine goosebump moment. Like it's an amazing scene. And that doesn't get to continue. And that just makes me so sad for him. Because clearly that story was made to continue. Like the only part that makes it seem like it doesn't is the part with Bruce Wayne and Michael Caine at the end.
Yeah.
But clearly in the setup of that story, they're setting up more story. The whole movie is setting up more story. And because of the other things, like Chris Nolan isn't a franchise kind of guy to begin with, and actually didn't want to make this movie. After Heath Ledger dies, he did not want to make this movie.
I don't blame him.
And he has to be like convinced, cajoled, talked into to make this movie because he didn't want to make it. Because Nolan's an interesting dude anyways.
Oh yeah.
I mean, his talking point always in interviews was name one third movie that's been pretty good.
Yeah.
Like you're talking Return of the Jedi, I suppose, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The other one that jumps out to me would be
Lord of the Rings.
Well, I don't know if you can count Lord of the Rings because they're all made congruently. It's like one giant movie. Anyways, his point is it's hard to make a third movie good. I think this movie proves that in a way because I think it's good, but it's not Dark Knight good.
Although, like, better than Batman Begins, but you needed Batman Begins to build off of.
Yeah. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt goes on. Look, we know him as a great actor. He's good, but he's not as big as I think he could have and should have been maybe if this story keeps moving on, because he goes off and does some kind of artsy things after this.
Yeah.
He like really solidifies that he's a very, very good at his craft at acting. Like he's in, I would say that the biggest thing he's been in since was what, Looper? The sci-fi time travel movie with Bruce Willis?
Yeah, that or Don John.
Yeah. See,
He was in Knives Out for a hot second.
Yeah. So my point is that I think if they make a fourth Dark Knight movie,
Snowden,
and he's a big part of that movie, and in fact maybe starts off as Batman for a little while in that movie, or dare I say it, Nightwing.
Yeah,
that would have been bonkers for him. And so I felt kind of sad for him because I'm just like, wow, I forgot when I rewatched it last night, I just forgot how much care they take in setting up his story. They spend a lot of time really building up his character.
Oh, what
and now
might have been.
Yeah. And now it doesn't make much sense. Like, it was only watching the movie knowing that, hey, Heath Ledger died and it messed up a lot of their plans, that you realize, like, because if you look at the outcome of the movie, it doesn't make so much sense they spent so much time on him. But it was wonderful when they did. And it makes me wish for what might have been.
Maybe we get Christopher Nolan's brother who made Westworld to take on this endeavor and get Joseph in the bat suit.
Is he too old now, though?
No, he's been fighting crime, doing that. But now a big villain comes back and he has to kick butt, take names.
It leads me into the bottom line question for this episode. There's been rumblings. Now, I don't know if they're just fan-made rumblings, but Christian Bale has actually been asked about it recently.
He has.
Is there ever going to be a Dark Knight 4? Will there be a fourth movie? And Christian Bale's answer was, if Nolan was on board, I'll come back. And Nolan's answer was, Christian Bale's on board, maybe.
So
should there be? So I guess the question I'm posing to you is, should there be?
Depends on the story angle. I don't think you can have Christian Bale be the main focus. I think that he needs to be brought out of retirement and then maybe pay that ultimate sacrifice where he dies at the end for the city he loves. Mm-hmm. But I think you would need a Robin, a Nightwing, an Azrael, one of those figures to be in it. And maybe now is the time that I don't even know what villain you would bring in. Although they do reference Cobblepot quite a bit.
Yeah.
In it and never have him. Or you have Scarecrow come back in his full glory.
I feel like, no, I'm not for that. He's in all three of those movies.
And he should be in all three more.
And look, I love Cillian Murphy, but move away from Scarecrow. He's the least strong villain of the trilogy.
Well, he's not really the villain in the first one.
They make you think he is for a long time now. And even then
Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah, even then I don't find him all that menacing, clearly next to the Joker and Bane.
Well, he's not. What he has is the chemical biowarfare, and then it messes with your mind, and then he's just a scary figure when you're under the influence.
I'm all for making them making another Batman movie. I don't think it's going to happen because I think they're all excited about how well the Batman did and they want to make more movies with Pattinson. But if they were going to, the story would have to be right. The story would have to be well done. Like just spitballing here. But it seems like the beginning of the movie, you have to have Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character as the Batman. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you can combine some elements of Azrael like stuff from the comics where maybe he has a love interest that is killed.
Yeah.
And he goes a little off the deep end. He starts killing and doing things Batman shouldn't do. And that forces Christian Bale to come back.
That would work.
Keep Anne Hathaway far away.
Yeah.
No Catwoman in this movie or the clunky one-liners, but bring Christian Bale back. and have him, you could have it really interesting where Batman could come back and actually be in conflict with the new Batman. And how confusing that would be for Gotham and all these things. Although Gotham would be slowly turning against Batman at this point.
Oh, yeah.
The new Batman. In fact, I don't know if you could even have Joseph Gordon-Levitt be the Batman. Maybe he has been working as the Robin.
Yeah.
Because Batman sacrificed himself. That's what all of Gotham thinks. And so the return of the Batman would be a big deal.
Be a huge deal.
Anyways, I think that's how you could do it, that he came back and then he convinces Joseph Gordon-Levitt to release his hate and be a real crime fighter. And I think it's possible. And if anybody could do it, Goyer and Nolan could do it.
We're holding out hope.
Yeah. Hey, I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't complain about it. Give us both. Give us another Pattinson movie and Dark Knight 4.
Right now they have potentially... There's a lot of rumblings about Joker 2 with Joaquin Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been introduced to a different Joker, although an earlier Joker within the Batman.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you could definitely have distinct universes or stories going on with different Batman. I'm good for DC just becoming the Batman factory where we just make nothing but Batman movies.
It does seem to be the one thing they do well. They can definitely do that. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this Be Kind rewind of The Dark Knight, The Fire Rises.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight Rises, where we did many Bane impressions on its 10th anniversary. It's been 10 years since the movie came out. Thank you so much for listening to the pod. As usual, make sure and subscribe to the pod and rate and review us. That helps us out a lot wherever you're listening to us. Make sure to do those things. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. That also helps you get information. And we like to include our listeners a lot in what we do. In fact, we allowed the listeners to vote on what movie we did the Be Kind rewind on. They picked Dark Knight Rises, so we did Dark Knight Rises. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.